barely know each other.
I know. So some context and full disclosure. I just pieced together that we both sort of committed in a way to Tesla on the exact same month, June in 2006, where he joined as the first non-engineer at the company, which is an interesting history. Almost no automotive people and almost entirely engineers. And the first venture round closed in that same month, where we became involved with the company and been involved ever since.
What we're not sure of is whether I came in before or after the round closed. I'm going to have to go back and check.
Yeah, we don't know which came first, but it was in the same month.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he committed to a company that no one had heard of, was not on anyone's radar screen. So maybe to start, before we get to Tesla and the company, tell us your story. How did you connect with Tesla, and what motivated you to seek them out?
So it actually started a couple of years prior. In a burst of enthusiasm, patriotic enthusiasm after 9/11, I went off to Washington looking for an opportunity to work in national security. And I had the great good fortune to have a great boss and a great job. I was Chief of Staff for Political Military Affairs. But there I had a front row seat for what was happening in Iraq and Afghanistan. Started thinking very hard about how we got to where we were. The first job every day was frankly reporting the casualty statistics from the field, our guys getting killed. And as I started thinking about root cause analysis, it all came back to oil. I decided that I wanted to do something about oil intensity in our economy on the other side of my experience in government. Came back to California looking for that opportunity, assumed that if there was anyone doing anything disruptive in the transportation category, it would be here. Was a little bit frustrated for a while because I wasn't finding such a project. But one day picked up a thread about a project where a couple of guys, very bright engineers, were looking to combine two things. One, lithium-ion technology, but as found in a commodity cell. So something that was already the core and most difficult aspect of the vehicle, the energy storage. We were already tapping into an existing industry dynamic, as well that we were packaging it, they were packaging it, they at the time, in a really exciting, compelling product. It was going to be a sports car. And that seemed to me, both of those seemed to be very logical things to do, and an excellent platform to basically, I mean, there's no other way to put it, to thumb our nose at the existing industry and maybe on a good day inspire some new thinking and some change.
That's right. From the very beginning, the company's had what some would call a purpose-driven mission to help catalyze and accelerate the entire industry shift to a future where all vehicles are electric, where the internal combustion engine is history. It's a peculiar positioning. I would think it motivates employees. It certainly gets fans and supporters excited, but from a business perspective, it's an interesting starting point, right?
It is, but you know, for me, at the point I found myself in my career, the idea of mission and attaching myself to a mission, however wild, was really appealing, much more compelling than had I come to it earlier. But what I will say about mission, whether it's mine or anyone else's at the company, is that it was super strong. It was the most passionate thing that any one of us held at that time, and it frankly sustained us through difficult times. I mean, starting a car company is crazy. It truly is. It makes no business sense, given the barriers to entry, given the track record of folks who've tried. And it was the sense of mission, the mission to catalyze a new technology, in this case, electric vehicle technology. And whether you came to it from a starting point of national security or issues with climate change or other factors, or simply the passion to introduce new technology and to do it in an exciting way, it's the thing that we all had in common. It's the thing that kept us going during the darkest hours.
Yeah, maybe that would be a good segue to those dark hours. When you're a game changer, it's not always that easy. There's a reason the game's played the way it is. There's a lot of vested interest in keeping the game played the way it is.
And right? that's when things are going well.
They're just trying to kill you.
Yeah, if they're just trying to keep you out, or if they're ignoring you, that's one thing, and it's on you to sort of get their attention and make some progress. But in 2008, the general economy went into a tailspin, largely led by the automotive industry. It was not at all certain whether some of the biggest players in the industry were going to survive that, let alone little old us, and so there was that crisis, other crises associated with internal things, engineering challenges we encounter, but it's been a challenging road for sure.
That's right. That's right. It's actually interesting when you think about it today. I hadn't planned this. I hope it doesn't go horribly wrong, but I'm curious, how many people have seen a Tesla today on your drive? I'm just curious. Take a moment to think. And there's some who wouldn't necessarily know what it looks like, potentially, and so it's
I think they're known as
kind of
Corollas,
bizarre
so
in the business. I mean, I once saw 4 red ones at the same time on the road, not parked, but just randomly. It was like, wow. So clearly a lot has changed, right? And hence the award tonight. And by the way, for those who don't know, Diarmuid runs business development, is vice president of this, and because of all kinds of things that happen on many different fronts, finds himself on the political front lines, on partnership front lines, just about everything business-wise in the company. So there's a far-ranging set of things we could talk about. But let me start with why the new entrant is the game changer, just in general, with Tesla as an example. And I think if you ask people in Silicon Valley, what are the 2 most innovative automobile companies today, or automotive technology companies today? And by innovative, meaning going to make a difference to the planet, meaning technologies and or companies for which history books are likely to be written. And I happen to know there are books being written about these 2 companies. Tesla and Google come to mind, which is kind of interesting. Both in Silicon Valley, both software-driven entrepreneurs at the helm, not traditional automobile companies. And so there's a Clayton Christensen sense of, hey, always new entrants lead change. That's what always happens. Is there anything special about electric vehicles, in particular, in your mind, that makes it the new entrant that has to catalyze change?
Well, first of all, we have the opportunity, and frankly, we have the necessity, because we either innovate or we die. I mean, we have to move forward. The reason why there's some sort of connectivity between these 2 entities, and why I think that the vector of innovation in this industry is moving in the direction it is, with more and more technology in the car, is that one of the things that we've done fundamentally is take so much of the mechanical element out of automotive transportation. Our cars are efficient, if only for the fact that we took a lot of moving parts, removed a lot of friction, heat loss, and so forth. It's a very efficient platform, but in so doing, we've essentially created a rolling computer. And that opens up all sorts of possibilities. And then when you make that manifest by taking all the switches, dials, and knobs off the dashboard, giving folks a huge touch screen, it opens up their imagination. And then when in parallel developments, you've got companies like Google looking at automotive driving, it simply expands the imagination. You can now imagine networks and connections and utilities and activities that could never have been contemplated 20 years ago. So I think that's why it's happening here, and that's, I think, why you're seeing this synergy, synchronicity, however you put it, between what is a very traditional sector, automotive, and the most advanced sector in our economy, high tech and technology.
And you also see a lot of the traditional car companies going on the hybrid path, or patches to a gas burner. It's interesting when you look at the Tesla, and I'll try to toot his horn and his company's horn a little bit here. As if you haven't noticed, it's been a very well reviewed product, right, by the Motor Trends, Consumer Reports of the world, historically so, unlike almost any car in history. Leading folks like Road and Track to say it's the most important car ever released in American history. These are statements you wouldn't expect for a first product release. But then it gets the highest safety rating ever, not just 5 stars in all categories, but in the subtext and deep analytical dive in, I actually find it's the safest car on the road today, including SUVs. Is this good luck, good engineering, or something special about EVs? I mean, the other fact is there aren't any other pure EVs, meaning they can't be a gas car. They were only meant to be electric from the ground up. Is that the answer, or is it some combination of all 3?
I think when your back is to the wall and you have no choice but to go forward because your survival's at stake, when you have passionate and visionary leadership who, and in this case I'm talking about an individual, will brook no compromise, and then you take a very logical, clinical perspective on what you're doing, devoid of emotion, where you say, okay, if I'm going to do the next generation vehicle, what would be the necessary requirements for success, you would quickly fasten upon, one, it's got to have a strong value proposition in terms of the pure economics. Two, it's got to be exciting and attractive. And three, because it's a conveyance that moves at high speeds and carries your beloved children and family members, that it must be safe. And so these become your primary and necessary design requirements. When you marry that to the necessity of surviving and a leadership which will insist that damn the torpedoes, we're gonna hit these marks whether people tell us it's reasonable to do so or not. You've got a formula for success.
Interesting. So you credit if I'm hearing you, a large part of it to the entrepreneurial sort of startup game that may be familiar to software companies, but long lost in enormous multi-billion-dollar multinationals.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the automotive industry is the paragon of an incumbency, which has developed in all sorts of, and in the U.S. in some particularly negative ways, in some regionally defined ways, but every decision, when the magnitude of the enterprise is that large, every small decision is consequential in unusual ways. When it's a highly regulated industry, and when the incumbency has gone, into the public policy arena to sort of wall itself off from innovation, you find the disruptive dynamic when it actually plays out is more pronounced because it's been so long since that incumbent industry either had the instinct or the ability to innovate versus what these guys on the outside are doing. And so when that tension snaps, it's the effect, whether real or psychological, is much more pronounced. And I think that's what you're seeing now.
That's an interesting point. We're in an interesting period right now, especially in Silicon Valley, where you might be at that tipping point of sentiment, maybe even within this room, where perhaps a sizable number of folks might believe the premise that electric cars are desirable and might have a bright future. And it was not that long ago when that would have been a distinct minority opinion, and amongst automotive incumbents, an absurdity, right? You can see the sentiment changing, right? Regionally, locally, some OEMs maybe more than others. So there's been some resistance. If I think about what most people have said most often, either potential buyers or like, well, I'm not sure it's for me, it's this thing that they call range anxiety, right? And I've driven an electric vehicle now for 5 years, and I charge nowhere but home because it's a Tesla, and the whole concept is absurd. But everyone thinks they're going to do a road trip across the country, who knows why, and want that freedom. So obviously there's been this brilliant, in my opinion, marketing program of the supercharger, which is a way perhaps to take that issue off the table. I'm curious, in your mind, do you see that initiative as primarily a wonderful way to address the primary resistance to sale, if it is that even in your mind, or do you really see it as, hey, that's an important capability that's going to really differentiate one vehicle over another?
I would be lying if I said that I wasn't personally surprised at how impactful that capability has been. That having been said, I mean, for the longest time, we've been very aware of a mentality among American car buyers in particular that every car I buy has to be capable of doing everything that I would ever imagine it could do. Walking right past the statistics that say that more than 80% of Americans drive less than 40 miles a day. So really, do you need a long-range electric vehicle? But I think, and with the range of whether it was the Roadster, now the Model S, more than satisfying anybody's reasonable daily driving requirements, I think that the supercharger, that last, it's not a last mile solution, but that it's the conclusion on the whole argument and satisfies that psychological concern that everybody has had, that I'm going to be giving up something by adopting the new piece. So whether people ever use a supercharger I think is a triviality compared to the effect
Peace
that
of
it's
mind.
having. Yeah.
So one last question before we wrap up, maybe an important one for everyone here. What do you see as the future of electric vehicles? We've made some progress. We have one car. Clearly no one would expect that this is the end of the story for Tesla or for others. What do you see in the cards, both in the U.S., internationally, product features? What's going to be exciting in the EV space over the next decade or so?
Well, one of the things I think is going to be exciting is that I think we've truly now reached the point where electric vehicle technology has been validated in the marketplace. So we're going to continue to push along at Tesla to introduce more and more economical products, excuse me. So our Generation 3 vehicle, and we're going to continue to do that. I think that one of the most exciting dynamics is now that some of the most important majors, not just Nissan, but BMW, the work we're doing with Mercedes and Toyota are entering the market, and that's really important to fill. As we're getting there on our own, that they're filling as well. But I frankly think that the other dynamic, which is the most exciting to watch, is what new capabilities are going to be built into these vehicles now that they are much more than can be much more than a simple conveyance. When you marry an exciting technology to get you around with an exciting technology that can connect you to the world, it's almost a continuum in that respect. But I think that that's the development. All the things that you can do when you're in that car that you could never imagine doing before. I think that's the stuff that's exciting to watch.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations to Tesla Motors.
Thanks.